Hello and welcome back. Thank you guys so much for being here. I just first want to acknowledge how grateful and appreciative I am for all of you for watching my energy updates, my guidance, my spiritual insight. I have so much in store for you that I'm just so excited to get out there. Before I dive into what today's video is going to be all about, I would love it if you could hit that subscribe button and follow along. Please make sure to share these videos and get these messages out there, because what I believe is the more that we share our knowledge and the things that light us up or inspire us, empower us, the more that we share that with other people, the more that we are helping to raise the vibration of humanity and help expand the consciousness, the more that we find our soul tribes and the more that we connect with our soul family. So this video, I have decided to share a little bit about how I got to where I am today. I have 30 years worth of experience that I could share with you all, but one of the biggest, most prevalent experiences that have occurred for me was that I had, and a lot of people would call it a near-death experience. However, it was a death experience. I died. Without a doubt in my mind, I know that I died. And the more we get into this story, the more that you will start to, whether you've heard other people's near-death experience stories or stories about having, people being on, machines at the hospital and not being able to detect a heartbeat for, sometimes I've heard stories of people for 7 minutes not being able to detect a heartbeat and no breath. And the more that you hear my story, the more that you will have these moments of realization as to why it is I am the way that I am. And I just cannot wait to hear how you are going to have moments of epiphany, major consciousness realizations, and fingers crossed, maybe you might be one of those that also hear this and sit with it, allow it to land, and then be able to touch into your own spiritual or psychic abilities. Because I truly do not believe that we all have to go through, some extreme situations to be able to activate these things inside of us. Sometimes we can just hear other people's experiences and the activations naturally happen. So that's something that I love knowing does happen for a lot of people when I share my story. And I would love to hear from you if it does happen for you, whether it happens immediately or days, weeks, or months later. So let's get started on my death experience. Some may call it a near-death experience, as I am still here. So it started on the first night. It started on the first night where I was a lot younger. I should have, how many years ago was it? I think I was about 21 I must have been. So yeah, maybe like 12 years ago. And I had two beers. That's it. And it didn't sit well with me. It didn't sit well. And so I started to feel really sick and I vomited. Now, I decided that, when I noticed it wasn't sitting well with me, that I was just going to go to bed. So when I jumped out of bed and I ran to the toilet to go and be sick, I was in a lot of pain. I felt a lot of pain. I didn't know what it was from, so I went back and laid down in bed. Now, I was trying to go to sleep because I just felt like the sickness and the pain could have been, you know, cramping or something. I don't know. Anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night crying, screaming in agony. Now, I was living in a share house at this time, and a couple of my housemates came in to see if I was okay, and I couldn't breathe. And so this was the moment that I realized that I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't talk to them. And this was the moment that I realized that something was really wrong. Something was really, really wrong. And so they contacted my family, and one of my aunties came to pick me up, and she rushed me to hospital. In the hospital, they just put me on all these painkillers, these big drugs. You know, I had the morphine connected to me, and it was just flooding through my veins. And I do remember at that time that the pain was starting to numb and that I could talk, but I was fairly unconscious anyway. I was pretty much out of it. I do remember that they transferred me to a bigger hospital in an ambulance or something. I don't know at that point, but they transferred me to another hospital where another family friend of mine came. I remember waking up and she came to visit me. I remember opening my eyes and them telling me that they were going to wheel me off to go and get all these tests, because they apparently had taken my bloods and nothing was coming back wrong. I couldn't articulate. I couldn't show them because I was so out of it. I couldn't show them where the pain was. I couldn't talk to them. And I remember them talking to me, and it's not that I could reply to them anyway, but they said, we've got to go and take you for this test and that test and this test. And I was just like, you know, I couldn't communicate. And I remember laying in a big room, and now at the point I didn't know what it was, but now I do. I was getting a CT scan. In the CT scan, I remember them telling me to take a deep breath in and out, and I couldn't do that because I was just in so much pain. Anyway, I went through all these tests, x-rays, ultrasounds, bloods, and I just kept going back for more. I remember like days and days were passing, and I was just completely out of it, on morphine, and I would dare say more drugs. I don't know. And then I had a doctor come in at one point, and I opened my eyes, and I remember seeing, I still couldn't talk, but I remember seeing and looking at the doctor who was talking to my family friend who was sitting by my side, and telling her that I had broken ribs and that there was nothing that they could do about it. And I remember just looking at the doctor, and then the doctor was looking at me, and it was kind of as though I was being treated as though I was in a coma, because my eyes were open, but there was nothing. I couldn't talk, I couldn't move, I couldn't communicate. I had oxygen tubes in, could hardly breathe. I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking. They had the IV in just to give me some fluids. And I remember the doctor looking at me and I looking at him. The reason why they didn't declare that I was in a coma is because I was opening and closing my eyes. That was the only thing. And I do remember the doctor saying that to my friend who was sitting beside my bed, that she is pretty much comatized, but we can't declare her in a coma because her eyes, she's got function to her eyes. And so I remember looking, and he looked at me, and after he was telling my friend that I had broken ribs, and then I was looking at the doctor, and he looked at me and said, You have 4 broken ribs and there's nothing we can do about it. You have to be on bed rest and you have to stay here until you're healed. And I just looked at him. In my mind, I just thought, okay, no worries, whatever, sure, cool. Then I remember days go by, days go by, days go by. My friend had left, she'd come back, she'd leave, she'd come back. It was night and day, night and day. The doctors would come and check on me, but there was nothing they could do about it. So they pretty much just kept, an eye on my levels and my fluids and keeping me on the morphine and added extras, I suppose. And I got to about week 3. Now, on week 3, I started to be able to talk. So the pain had subsided enough for me to just be able to use my vocals, I suppose, because I still wasn't able to move my body and I still wasn't able to eat, drink, nothing. But I started to talk to my friend, and that was really good. That looked like we had a huge improvement. It looked like we had a huge improvement, and I was just telling her how fascinating it was for the last 3 years of me being completely conscious and hearing everything going on around me, just simply not being able to communicate, not being able to converse, not being able to move or do anything. And during those 3 weeks, I felt like I was declining. I felt like it was getting very close to me mentally giving up, because I just, I had no hope. So I remember one day my friend and I were laughing, and I remember her telling a funny joke to me, and I went to laugh and I was like, and because I still had broken ribs, it actually hurt a lot to laugh. So I had 2 broken ribs on each side. And so 4 altogether, except because they were the same, because you have a set of ribs, one set of ribs, they were on the same vertebrae. So they were both equally, that's why I couldn't move. In my mind, I was thinking like, people break ribs all the time, right? I thought that was the case. I thought people did, especially like sportsmen or sportswomen or, rugby players and stuff. But apparently it was the way that the ribs broke and the placements of the 4 at the front. Now, why is this significant? Because the day that my friend and I started to talk, the doctor came in. And the doctor came in to tell her, but then saw that I was talking, so he was able to tell both of us that one of the ribs was puncturing a lung. And because it looked like I was getting better, and because it had been 3 weeks and now declining again, he said that the way that the rib was puncturing a lung, he told me that I had 7 days to live. He said, we don't like to give people with this type of condition any longer than 7 days. He said, you could make it to 14, so you could double what we would normally, give people. He said, but, I would highly suggest to let your friends and family know and to get them to come in as soon as possible to say their goodbyes. And so obviously that was an absolute shock to the system. I really, truly, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to think. I thought I was getting better. Although I knew I was still in a lot of pain, I knew that things weren't okay. I thought I was improving. So there was a moment of silence, with my friend and the doctor, and I just looked at him and said, okay, okay. And so I just said to my friend, can you make the calls? I've only just started talking to her. I didn't want to make those calls. And I just said to her, can you make the calls? Can you just make a couple of calls and let them know? She did that. She walked out of the room and she went and did that. And I remember my mum was away on a holiday and she couldn't get back for a couple of days. Although she knew she'd be back within 7, she tried to do as much as she could to come as soon as possible. The rest of my family and my friends, I remember them all coming in and saying their goodbyes and filling the room up with flowers. And, I was able to talk to them, in a soft voice, and I couldn't move, so I couldn't give them a hug. But I did have a lot of people, hug me and, say their goodbyes and crying and all of that. And it's a very traumatic and sad experience to be reflecting on, actually. Now that night that everybody had come, no, it must have been a couple of nights later, actually, because it was after my mum got there. A couple of nights later, I remember going to sleep. I slept quite a lot during the period of time in hospital anyway, but that I remember going to sleep and it was dark. And I felt my body and my soul completely detach, like they were two completely separate things. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. Now, if you have listened to my other YouTubes, you would have heard how I had been lucid dreaming and astral traveling, since like 18, 19. And so when this near-death experience occurred, I was 21. And so I knew the difference between having like out-of-body experiences or the astral projection or lucid dreaming. This was different. This was something I've never experienced otherwise. Now, I went up and I remember vividly experiencing everything through my soul's lenses. And I was on the top of a white cloud. I'd never been to this place before. And right in front of me appeared a big white arch. A big white arch. And I was just standing there, just in disbelief of what was happening, because I'd, never been to this place before throughout the multidimensional realms, And this big white arch started appearing out of nowhere on top of this white cloud, and then bam, there was God. There was God. And let me tell you, I am not a religious person. I have studied multiple different sorts of religions because it fascinates me and I love learning. And that is a massive part of my values in life, is learning. But I've never devoted myself to a particular religion. So when God appeared under the arch on top of a white cloud, saying that I was shocked could be a very well an understatement. But he was telepathically communicating with me, introducing himself as God. And he said, "You have crossed over." And I was like, "Pardon? What?" He's like, "You've crossed over, you've passed over. You have exited the human experience." And I was like, okay, fair enough. No worries. Because at that time, I had already lost hope. I had just been told I was not going to make it to pass away in 7 days. So I'd already prepared myself. And so I was like, okay, fair enough, no worries. Cool, easy, sweet as. That wasn't hard. And then to the right of this arch was my stepdad, who passed away when I was 12 years old. To the right was my granny, who I was really close with as well, who passed away when I was younger. And they were both telepathically communicating with me and saying, you have a choice. You have a choice. And I was like, what are you talking about? Telepathically communicating back to them, right? I was like, what are you talking about? And then out of nowhere appears behind all three of them, although it was like they were invisible and translucent anyway, so I could see through them. But then when I focused on each one, they were quite bright and, bold. Behind them, I saw a whole tribe of all the people that I have known in this human existence, this human experience, to have passed over. A whole tribe of people. So if that alone explains one thing, then I have known a lot of people in my life who has passed. A lot. And then they all started, it was as though they all started singing in like this a cappella, harmonious tone of, you have a choice, you have a choice, you have a choice. And they were all humming it. And I was standing there by myself on this side, right? Just looking at what was going on top of this big white cloud, thinking, if I've died and I've gone to heaven, I don't know what I believe in heaven and hell, but if I've died and gone to heaven and I've just met God and here's all my past loved ones, they're telling me I have a choice. It was like I was like fully analyzing the situation in a very rapid, responsive way. And I thought, okay, cool. How do I make that choice? The reality is, I didn't have to say that out loud for them to hear me, because we can all telepathically hear each other's thoughts anyway. That didn't occur to me until my dad, my stepdad, said to me, after I thought that I was thinking, well, then how do I make that choice? He then answered it, although I didn't say it out loud. That's what made me realize that we are all in sync on a telepathic communication level. He said, you need to start following your purpose. And so that was the moment I realized that my next thought was going to be telepathically heard anyway. So then I said, well, what's my purpose? And then he told me. And then he told me. And so I said to him, okay, all right, no worries then. Okay, deal. The next morning, I woke up in that hospital bed. I pulled the IV out of my arm. I pulled the needle out of my leg, pulled everything off my face, and I stood up. I walked up to reception and I said, hey guys, just want to let you know I'm going home today. Everyone freaked out because only a couple of days ago they told me that I was going to die. So they were like, you need to get back on that bed. So they all panicked, rushed, and they grabbed me and they tried to rush me back onto the bed. One of them had a needle to put the morphine in my leg, and they tried to. I said, guys, it's okay. I said, I died last night. I'm going home. The shock on all of these nurses and doctors' faces was like, huh? What? I was like, I died last night, you guys. And they're like, you can't be standing. Like, what is going on? And I was like, are you not hearing what I'm saying? I died. Anyway, I sat on the bed and, they sat down and they wanted to hear me out. And I remember there was about like 5 of them standing there. And I remember one of them said, we're going to have to get the doctors up here. We can't allow you to go anywhere. We're going to have to send you through all these tests because like you haven't moved in 3 weeks. Whether you've like spoken, this is crazy. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Sure, whatever you have to do. The doctor came up and saw me and he was like, this is weird. Like, what? So they sent me straight down to another CT scan, sent me off to x-rays and did all the shebang. And the tests came back, no broken ribs. None. They couldn't find anything wrong with me. And so they said that legally they can't keep me here in hospital if there's nothing wrong with me. So I called up my friend. I said, hey, do you want to come down to the hospital and pick me up? They're letting me out today. And she was like, what? I said, I died last night. I was like, I get to go home. Anyway, she came and she sat with me and we were having a good laugh. And she was like, you look different. Like your skin, like your complexion, your skin has changed. Like you will have warmth back in it. Like what? Anyway, I remember the doctor talking to her saying, we can't let Tamzin go home unless she has 24-hour surveillance and somebody that can sign a declaration to say that they'd rush her back as soon as possible if she had any moments of declining. And so my friend signed this declaration and took me home. They gave me a massive script of pharmaceutical painkillers. Although I didn't need the painkillers, the aftermath of not moving for 3 weeks, not eating for 3 weeks, not talking, not, being stuck like that for 3 weeks, my body was stiff, I did have broken ribs. And so my rib cage, my lungs, everything had been contracting and forcefully kept going for 3 weeks. So my body felt that aftermath, right? However, I got out of hospital and I went on the biggest healing journey. I left everything behind in my life that was toxic, that wasn't serving me, that wasn't beneficial. I'm telling you, I moved out of the share house that I was living in. I left my party years behind, friends that were not healthy for me. I went and got a job that was a lot better for me, a lot more fulfilling. It provided far more for me than anything that I'd done prior. I then worked and worked and worked, and I focused on myself. I continued to focus on myself. And although the initial purpose that I was told when I was in the heavens, I did, and I strived for years to follow that purpose. And I then had very undeniable evidence that spirit was around me. At this time, I genuinely just thought that it was my past loved ones. I didn't have a full comprehension that I had a spirit team. I didn't have a full comprehension that my spirit guides, I had galactic councils of light, I had this, I had that, nothing. Until I continued to have undeniable evidence that I was getting redirected on my purposeful path and that I had completed the initial purpose that brought me back into this life. And so if you take anything from this video today, I want you to know that if you've ever been told that you have one purpose and one purpose only in this life, then please continue to re-examine that your life has multiple purposes and multiple timelines and multiple directions, multiple paths. And you have so many things that are a part of the reason why you're here. And so we can achieve multiple purposes. You know, since then, I have been shown and given just very clear direction on when a purpose has been complete and what my next purpose is. Your life's purpose is going to be there for you. And sometimes you may need a redirection, and sometimes that redirection might come down to having your life crumble and fall apart. For me, it was laying in that hospital bed thinking that I was going to die and genuinely being okay with that. It was saying goodbye to my family and friends and passing over. But what came after that time was an absolute miracle. So I just would love to hear what you think of this story. I'd love to hear if you have had a near-death experience or a death experience, if you've met, if you've been on this white cloud, met God under that arch, and what moments of this story gave you a bit of an epiphany or a moment of realization or a very deep potential spiritual awakening moment. All right. Thank you guys so much. And don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like, share, comment, all the things. And I will see you next time.